Can you still hear me though?
Recording is started. Good. Yep, I can still hear you.
Okay, good.
We have a few people in the room already. That's good. Someone already saying hello. Leila, good afternoon. Everyone, we've got another minute and then we will start. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Ara, I think, yeah, it's okay to turn off your mic. Just keep an eye on what's going on. If you can, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
sure, definitely.
Perfect. Good afternoon and welcome everybody to today's Macmillan webinar, our back to school session using story-based approach. Hopefully you all like stories. Everybody likes stories. Everybody saying good afternoon from a variety of places. Good to see you all. Everybody keen to hear some stories today. That's what it's all about. From Erbil, lovely. So to start this session, I think we're gonna just kick straight into it. We're gonna look straight away at a story. If you just arrive, don't worry, we will be just cracking right on. So I want you to close your eyes for just 30 seconds, not too long. If you're at work, don't fall asleep. And if you're in Starbucks or somewhere, please keep an eye on your bag. But close your eyes, take a deep breath, and relax. You're at home. It's the middle of the night, but you can't sleep, so you got up and you're sitting in the window of your bedroom, looking out into the quiet night. In the moonlight, you catch a glimpse of an enormous, long, pale, wrinkly face with the most enormous ears. The nose is as sharp as a knife, and above the nose, there are two bright, flashing eyes. And the eyes are staring straight at you. There is a fierce and devilish look about them. Now, this is just an introduction to the story. Anybody know which story this comes from? I've adapted it, obviously, personalized it to you guys. Anybody have any ideas which famous story this comes from? Any guesses? Hopefully everybody heard the story. No idea? Let's set the scene a little bit. You're looking out into the street, into the darkness, and you see an enormous, long, pale, wrinkly face with the most enormous ears, the nose sharp as a knife, above the nose, two bright, flashing eyes, and they're staring straight at you. Aha, there they are. Nope, not Dracula, although that would be a good guess, and I think this very scary looking picture might actually suggest that it could be that. Okay, maybe someone will get it in a minute, I will tell you. But thinking about what I just read out, how does it make you feel? How did the actual, yeah, look at this, now we're getting it. How does the story make you feel, listening to those words, closing your eyes, imagining? What kind of feelings did it evoke? It's not a horror story. Scary, excited, dizzy, maybe fell off the chair a little bit. Expecting something to happen, something's gonna happen. Anticipation, curious, suspicious, all great words. Now let's think about that story if I was just to say, okay, come, sit down at the table, I'm going to tell you a story. Okay, in the moonlight, Sophie caught a glimpse of an enormous, long, pale, wrinkly face with the most enormous ears. The nose was sharp as a knife, and above the nose there were two bright, flashing eyes. And the eyes were staring straight at Sophie. There was a fierce and devilish look about them. There's a real difference, I think, between the way you can just read a story to them and the way you can present a story. You move from Spirited Away. Maybe, yeah, the old Japanese stories, which are great. Sophie, BFG. Yes, everyone loves the BFG. So this is what today's webinar is about. It's not looking at stories just from the perspective of teaching language skills or teaching children how to read, the skills to read. It's about looking at the power of stories. It's about appreciating that we are wired for narrative. Narrative is all around us. We're attracted to stories every day. When we watch a movie in the cinema, it's a story. When we watch TV shows, stories. The presenters you listen to, the best presenters tend to be storytellers, comedians. What else? Stories on Instagram, this kind of Facebook, this movement and this introduction of the story. It's warming to us. We're curious about them. We have curious minds. And it takes us on an emotional journey. It's an emotional part and experience, life experience, stories. And when it comes to children, because we're looking very much at pre-primary and primary today, photography is the best photographs generally tend to be ones that evoke a story. But we're looking at stories for pre-primary and primary predominantly. And when it comes to children this young, they still understand stories. By the age of 3, children are sensitive to the causal structures underlying stories. And by 5 years old, they can differentiate between realism and fantasy within a story. And they can pick out and follow a theme within a story. So they can definitely get on board with that type of methodology in the classroom. We just need to learn how to harness that and make the most out of it, how to take it as an opportunity, I think. So this is our structure for the day. I'm not quite in the screen, anyway. So we've had a look at the opening, the power of an opening to attract us, to make it motivating for our students. We're going to do a little quiz just to make things nice and interactive, a short little quiz. Anybody guess on what author the quiz might be about based on our opening activity? We're going to have a look at story itself. We're going to have a look a little bit about the theory around using a story-based approach. This is in the first half, and in the second half, we're going to look at some very practical activities. For those of you who are part of the module that this webinar is connected to, you will probably be looking forward to and expecting some practical activities. We're going to do 5 snapshots of 5 practical activities, and then I will be posting them in the classroom in a format that's more accessible so that you can take them away, think about them, manipulate them, use them, and reflect on them later on. So it's all part of this ongoing process that this module is designed to be about. So I hope that's okay. I hope you are excited and looking forward to the next, let's say, 55, 60 minutes. And we will start. We're going to start with our quiz. So I'm sure everybody has a favorite author that they can remember from their childhood. If you have a favorite author from your childhood, please let me know what it is. I would be very interested to know. I have many, but one of them was definitely Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl, for me, the use of language, the use of emotion, so exciting. I love his stories. I've got one particular favorite, which I will share with you as we go. I won't tell you what it is now. But we're going to do a short quiz called Roald Dahl's Words of Wisdom, where someone likes the Chocolate Factory. Excellent. So I'm going to present a quote and you have to guess which book it is from. Yeah, I love George Orwell stories as well, actually. So we can crack right onto this one because it's a nice, easy quiz. So our first one, keeping things nice and light. We are now about to visit the most marvelous places and see the most wonderful things. So which Roald Dahl novel does this come from? Which story does this come from? There's a little kind of clue if you can make out that picture. And I've used this quote because I think if we're thinking about these quotes in relation to the topic that we're talking about today, this quote makes us see that stories transport us. They take us somewhere else. And if you're a student, you're 6, 7, 8 years old, maybe you haven't traveled outside of your country, maybe you live a quiet life, who knows? But stories can take us places. They can show us the exotic. They can show us different ways of living. And I think that's an amazing thing about the use of stories, not just using them for their language, but using them to show children what the world and beyond the world can be about. Anyone got a guess for this? We've got a few. So next one, then it's a popular, Pooja gets it. 1 point to you, Pooja. James and the Giant Peach is our first answer. This is the first Roald Dahl story and the first quote. I wondered whether it would throw people and they would go with George's Marvelous Medicine, but they didn't. James and the Giant Peach. Yep, Sonia, a point to you as well. Our second one. However small the chance might be of striking lucky, the chance was there. Which story, Roald Dahl story, is this one from? Give you a second to think about it. When I think of this quote and I think of teaching and teaching students, I think about, the frustration that we sometimes feel in class. Has anyone ever played that game where with 2 people and you take a candy like an M&M and you throw it into their mouth? Sometimes it feels like that's what we're doing when we're teaching very young learners. A piece of vocabulary, kind of trying to hit the mouth, and some of it's not going in and some of it is. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, excellent. Yes, point to you guys. Hiya, Jonalyn. You are correct. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. A good one. No, wasn't one of my favorites, but a good one. Next one. If you have good thoughts, they will shine out of your face like sunbeams, and you will always look lovely. This was definitely one of my favorite Roald Dahl stories. I loved this story. Any guesses from which one it's from? If you have good thoughts, they will shine out of your face like sunbeams, and you will always look lovely. And again, I think, yes, Irene, point to you. And I think if we're thinking about stories and the use of stories, again, beyond language, stories are a great way to promote positive self-image for children. And if we're thinking about Roald Dahl stories in particular, they're probably being used in upper primary. And, at this age, our students, the children, they're about to embark on, one of the most difficult times of their lives. They're about to move into early adolescence, when differences are highlighted and exaggerated and they feel self-conscious. So really using these kinds of stories are a great way of saying it doesn't matter what you look like. It's all about what's inside. And I think that's a really good message that comes out of this particular quote. Yes, good. The twits. A few people got this one right. This fantastic quote. The matter with human beings is that they is absolutely refusing to believe in anything unless they is actually seeing it right in front of their own schnozzles. I mean, this is an easy one. You should all be able to get this one just because of the language being used. Yeah, Irene, perfect. It is, of course, the BFG. I had to hide away the picture in this one because it was too easy, but I think it was an easy one anyway. And again, I think if we're thinking about this in relation to our topic, it's sometimes very difficult, frustrating again for teachers. We're teaching language, we have a unit, we're going through the vocabulary, we're going through the grammar. We get to the end of our week or our 2 weeks, and we feel like, I'm frustrated. I feel like they didn't get it. But actually, just because you don't see it right there in front of you doesn't mean that they haven't absorbed it. It doesn't mean they won't be able to bring it out again later. It always reminds me of this quote of my own story, actually. So at Christmas time, I went to Colombia with my wife, and she lives in a small town in Colombia, obviously Spanish speaking. And most of her immediate family don't really speak any English. And all her cousins and nieces and nephews are there at the Christmas Day party. And one of them comes up to me, he's about 8 or 9, and he says to me, Uncle Nathan, can you help me to build this Lego, whatever it was, that he got for Christmas? I was like, yeah, no problem. So we sat down, and I wanted him to do it. So I was guiding him through the instruction manual, and he's working away, and he's chit-chatting to me. He's asking me various questions about, what do I do? Where am I from? This kind of thing. And his parent came over, his dad, and he said, this is the first time I've ever seen him use English. He's been going to this school for 4, 5 years, and he's never said a single word in English. In fact, I thought I was wasting my money by sending him to this quite expensive school because I thought he's not actually learning any English. But actually, he just needed a meaningful connection, a meaningful environment to actually get that out. And I presented that, obviously, because I'm an English speaker. So, he had a real good chance to kind of get that out. And I think that's a really nice way of showing that sometimes what's going on in their head is actually a lot more powerful than perhaps we give them credit for. Drifted off topic a little bit there. Let's get back on with the quiz. BFG it was. This one, I love this one for you guys. I am not, of course, telling you that for 1 second that your teacher actually is a witch. All I am saying is that she might be one. Where's this from? It's not Matilda. It's a good guess, though, because there is obviously the very evil Miss Trunchbull in Matilda. It is from, yes, The Witches. And this one was my favorite Roald Dahl story when I was a kid. I read it so many times. I loved the idea of turning into this mouse and creeping around the house where no one could see me. It was, I think, a really powerful story for me. The Witches. I love The Witches. And just to make sure, I would like you all to scratch yourself and make sure you are not, in fact, a witch. And the last one, this is a 2-point to finish off the quiz. This is 1 point for if you know the story, and 1 point if you know the next line or the continuation of this line. I'm wondering what to read next. Irene, well done. It is from Matilda. Sana, Matilda, definitely. But what is the next line or the continuing line? I'm wondering what to read next. I want to see if somebody can get it. I'm sure somebody knows. Matilda, yeah, a point to you. Yes, excellent. Hanan, Pooja, Irene. I've finished all the children's books. And this is what we really want. We want to promote this reading for pleasure, reading for passion, and creating lifelong readers in our students. Wouldn't it be great if one of your students came up to you and said, Miss or Sir, I finished all the children's books. Imagine what they would know. Imagine all the places that they would have been to. Good. So I hope you did well in the quiz. And this is the continuing sentence. I finished all the children's books. So, a nice friendly little quiz to get us going. But now I want to look at an actual story. So we want to look at the story-based approach. I'm not actually going to demonstrate the story-based approach, but we're going to look at the reading of a story, and we're going to evaluate it and think about all the different things that I did, I could have done, the areas of focus, this kind of thing. So are we all ready for a story? So I want to get the old brain cells working. So what animal am I? I'm going to have to do a little bit of acting here. If you imagine I'm in the, let's go this way. I look like a dinosaur, I think, but anyway, I'm sure you can guess from that. A monkey, yeah, thanks. A shark, not quite a shark. A Crocodile, yeah, an alligator or a crocodile. Let's go with crocodile, not a gorilla. It would be a bit more like this, I guess. Yes, I am a crocodile. First question. Second question, what do I use to clean my teeth? Yep, got some crocodiles coming in. Hopefully you get this right. I would be very disappointed if people don't know. No, I definitely don't use a fork. I use, good, a toothbrush. Yes, I use a toothbrush, thankfully, to clean my teeth. So we've got a crocodile and we've got a toothbrush. Anybody know the story? Pretty self-explanatory, given the two words that we have. It is called Mr. Crocodile's Toothbrush. Anybody know this story? Hopefully you do. Okay, here we go. Meet Mr. Crocodile. He's green. He has nice clothes. He has big white teeth. He brushes his teeth every day. Every morning, Mr. Crocodile goes for a walk. He sees his friends. Hello, he says. Hello, Mr. Crocodile, say his friends. Mr. Crocodile is a very happy crocodile. He smiles and laughs. But not today. Today, Mr. Crocodile is sad. Why is he sad? He's sad because he can't find his nice red toothbrush. Mr. Crocodile is looking for his nice red toothbrush. Where is it? Mr. Rabbit is helping Mr. Crocodile. First, they meet Mr. Elephant. Mr. Elephant is big and fat. Is Mr. Crocodile's toothbrush under Mr. Elephant? Let's look. No, it isn't. Next, they meet Mrs. Giraffe. Mrs. Giraffe is very tall. Is Mr. Crocodile's toothbrush on her head? Let's look. No, it isn't. Next, they meet Mr. Tiger. Mr. Tiger has beautiful stripes. Is Mr. Crocodile's toothbrush next to you, Mr. Tiger? Let's look. No, it isn't. Mrs. Lion is sleeping under a tree. She has a big mouth. Is Mr. Crocodile's toothbrush in Miss Lion's mouth? Let's look. No, it isn't. Where is Mr. Crocodile's nice red toothbrush? This is Mr. Hippo's bed. Mr. Hippo is sleeping. Is Mr. Crocodile's toothbrush under Mr. Hippo's bed? Let's look. No, it isn't. Where is my toothbrush? Oh, where is my nice red toothbrush, says Mr. Crocodile. He is very sad. Let's try again. Okay, I'm not going to read this page because it's just a continuation of no, it isn't. Move this. Okay, so this is lesson 1 for me. I'm just reading the story to my children, which is going to be you guys today. So what I want to do with my students in lesson 1, I want to just read them the story as it is, and then I want to set them a task, and I'm going to look at predictions. So what I want is for them to predict what room they think the toothbrush has been lost in. So I will send them away tonight for homework. I want them to draw a picture of their favorite, or of the room that they guess, the room that they predict. Maybe they can draw a few things in it. Maybe they choose the kitchen and they draw the fridge and the table. And tomorrow they're going to bring that back in. On the second day, we're going to read the story again. I'm not going to read it again, but we would read it again. And then we can do a show and tell we can start with show and tell. They can show their pictures. We can guess, who's chosen what. And then we can read the story again. And we'll finish the story off this time with the last slide, which would be this one. So we read the story right down through, and then we say, where is Mr. Crocodile's nice red toothbrush? It's in the bathroom, but where in the bathroom? Can you see it? We could do this activity, and then we can reflect back on whether or not they guessed it right. But they've had a nice opportunity to create something, to create their own work and to present that work, and we've got some speaking in as well. So if maybe I could be recycling rooms of the house that I've done in a previous module or in a previous unit, so we could do it that way. We also have this prediction going on so that they're continuously thinking about it. But the difference between day 1 and day 2 is I didn't just give them the answer straight away. I think a lot of times we read the story to them and then that's it. We just kind of end the story. I think it's really nice if we end on a hook so that when we come back the next day, they have something that they're looking for. They want to hear the story because they want to hear the ending. So I think that's a really nice way. We could also, on the 3rd day, go back and read it again. And now they're very familiar with the actual story itself. So we could focus on a particular area of the language. So I might be focusing on the grammar. So I might want them to say with me, first of all, no, it isn't. So we will read the story. So next they meet Mr. Tiger. Mr. Tiger has beautiful stripes. Is Mr. Crocodile's toothbrush next to you, Mr. Tiger? Let's look. And then, okay, everybody together. No, it isn't. Yep, so we're using the book now to focus on particular areas of language. And there's lots of language in here that we could be focusing on. We could turn off into adjectives. We could look at animals. We could look at colors, all different types of things. I purposely picked a year 1 story or level story just because of the length. If you're teaching older grades, obviously there's a lot more language and there's a lot more areas that you could be looking at. If we think about the story that we did at the very beginning, the BFG, looking at things like the simile of sharp as a knife, this kinds of things we could be looking at. Yeah, we've got everybody kind of guessing on the chat board here behind the laundry basket, which is great. Okay, so we've done the story, we've done the prediction, they're familiar with the story, we've gone through the story and we're involving them, getting them to interact and use the language out loud. Lots of kind of questions could go on in the 3rd one. But I actually want to do something a little bit different. So now we've done the story a few times. I actually want to change the narrator. So I am going to take a 2-minute break and have a drink over here. And I'm going to invite a good friend of mine in. He is going to read the story to you in a different way. Give him a second. Show me which way I need to go. I need to go this way. Okay. So he's a bit shy. He's never actually been on screen before, so you might want to give him a warm welcome. He is very shy. Let's see. I think he's just about ready to come. Here he is. Hello. He's a bit shy, so you guys might have to kind of say hi. Welcome. Thank you very much, Miriam. That's very nice. And he's feeling a little bit more. Yeah, he is. There, he's feeling better now. And he's going to give you all a wave. Hi. Okay, he wants to read the story to you. He needs to get in screen, which is not actually that easy. Okay, how are you feeling today? Hello. Yes, I'm feeling very good. Thank you very much. So here is today's story. Mr. Crocodile. Meet Mr. Crocodile. He's green. He has nice clothes. He has big white teeth. He brushes his teeth every day. Every morning, Mr. Crocodile goes for a walk. He sees his friends. Hello, he says. Hello, Mr. Crocodile, say his friends. Mr. Crocodile is a very happy crocodile. He smiles and laughs. But not today. Today, Mr. Crocodile is sad. He's feeling sad. Why is he sad? He's sad because he can't find his nice red toothbrush. Mr. Crocodile is looking for his nice red toothbrush. Where is it? Mr. Rabbit is helping Mr. Crocodile. First they meet, they meet me. Yes, they meet Mr. Elephant. Mr. Elephant is big and oh no, I think Mr. Elephant is sad. Why is Mr. Elephant sad? Mr. Elephant is sad because I think these are not very nice words. He's going to leave, and oh no, I will come back and take his place. So, what we're doing here is we're manipulating the story. I'm not going to go any further with that. Mr. Elephant will maybe come back and say hi again in a little while. But if we're looking at our stories in a story-based approach, we're looking for opportunities to, like I said, develop that emotional connection with our children. And we're looking for ways to develop projects with the stories. Puppets are great. I love using puppets. But the great thing about puppets is that children can easily connect with them in a way that they cannot. They see you as their teacher. You are the deliverer of work. And a puppet has a much easier connection with them. We can also utilize that to go off. And I would use this in a particular project. So we can now, for this particular lesson, we can completely sidetrack from this story. And we can look at, okay, how does it make us feel? What could we do to help Mr. Elephant? So we're looking at this in a community-based way. So maybe to help Mr. Elephant, we will look at, I don't know, developing a healthy eating program. And they could develop a healthy eating program. We could be looking at food. And at the end of the week, maybe they could produce a poster of a nice, slim Mr. Elephant with his kind of gym shorts and some sweatbands on, and they can make it really fun. And I think it's really nice that we don't need to complete the whole story. Sometimes we can get halfway through. We can just take a diversion and go in a different direction. And if we plan for that, we can really draw a lot of things out of the story. So I wanted to share that particular type of activity with you. I'm going to carry on through the story because we don't need to read it. So there's lots of different directions a story can go in, and there's lots of language that can be used within that as well. There's so many things that we could do with this. And this brings me to, I guess, something that maybe a phrase that you might want to keep in the forefront of your minds. One story, but many paths. Using a story over a variety of lessons, not just using it in one lesson to present grammar or to present vocabulary, but using it across a selection of lessons with different purposes and using it for different things. So in this, we've used it for social and emotional learning, to look at feelings, to look at healthy eating, to look at helping our friends. We've looked at the grammar. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. We could have looked at prepositions and many other things as well in this particular story. So I hope that's given us some ideas. That's kind of thrown some things up in the air for us, because we're going to have a little look at the kind of background and theoretical application of, I guess, story-based teaching. I'm sure, as we would all agree, and certainly based on the activities that we've just done, that stories obviously have value in the classroom. I pitched this in the actual survey for the module. What value do stories have in the young learner classroom? And I took all of the answers. There was about 50, I think. And I took the kind of keywords out of that, and I've plonked them all into a very nice word cloud. So this is actually not, this is your content. This is nobody else's. This isn't something that's been plucked out of a book. And I love I love reading all of your responses, all of the different things that people say, and from across such a wide region as well. We've got people from Morocco, people from Kurdistan, people from Palestine, people from the UAE, people from all over the place, and the way people have expressed how they see stories as having value in the classroom, I think was fantastic. And if we look at this word cloud, I think, these two words in the very middle really pop out. This use of imagination, which I think is a fantastic expression for using stories in the classroom. When we think about young children, primary school children, and and the pressures that we put on them, the schooling is very academic, and we become very academic. If we look at course books, they're often more academic than arts-based, even if they have arts-based activities in them. And we have a lot of course books, I don't know which ones you're using, but A lot of them kind of follow a more of a kind of STEM type of methodology, a lot of kind of science, a lot of stuff about the world. And all of that stuff is important, and all of that stuff is great for young children, exploring the world around them. They love that. But also I think it's important to stimulate and remember that they're still young children, and this power of the imagination is something that we need to ignite, and we want it to flourish, because this is where they make meaning in their learning, is by using their imagination, all that play-based learning stuff. Also, I think the other word that really jumps out here is motivation. So stories can be a great way to motivate children to engage with our content. If you are 6, 7 years old and you're asked, open a book and look at a page which has got a bunch of gap fills and, matching word activities, it's not that exciting. So, this can be a great way to get them to engage with real, authentic content. I've taken this from a session that was done by Viv Lambert, which is one of the authors of some of the Macmillan titles, which have more of a kind of story-based approach to them. And she describes using stories in class in a scaffolded approach. So I don't need to go through these. I'm sure you can see them. She had two different pathways, from introducing the story right through to kind of creating your own version. And then the other side, she had, arousing interest and curiosity, which is what I tried to do before, and then transferring that to our own experiences as the kind of highest level, and then extending them, like I said, into project work. In fact, I've got them both on the same slide here if you want to see them both. So these are kind of a scaffolded approach to the use of stories in the classroom. Another couple of famous ELT authors that have embraced this particular idea is Jeremy Harmer and Herbert Gupta, in a book that's not that old called Story-Based Language Teaching. And this kind of gave me the idea of how to kind of create this module. They kind of go for a more metaphorical approach to using stories in class. They talk very much about roots. Anybody want to kind of guess what they mean by roots? They talk about roots, branches, and harvest. Anybody want to guess what the roots might be? What are they referring to when they say about the roots? I don't know if anybody's read this book. A few people writing. Not necessarily the basic language, not necessarily the beginning of the story. It could be the plot, the introduction, moral, the main base. What they talk about nourishing. They talk about nourishing children towards stories. So using some of those techniques that I use, like predicting, this kind of thing. They also talk about branches. And in fact, I'm just going to move through because we're taking quite a while. They're talking about harvesting. So when they talk about roots, they're talking about the fact that children have this motivation for listening or engaging with stories inside them. And we need to nourish that by giving them certain types of activities. It could be in a lot of stories that we do in class, we use a picture at the very beginning to kind of introduce the topic, perhaps. Coursebooks tend to do that quite a lot. We could talk about the topic itself. We could introduce keywords. We could give them questions to look out for during the story. It could be you need to think about how many animals he meets as he goes through the story. He meets whatever, 6. We could give them something like an identity bag, so we can relate it to their own lives. So if you lost your toothbrush, who would you ask? Where would you go to look for it? These kinds of questions. And again, we can do things like miming, which I did at the beginning. When it comes to branches, we're thinking about how we use that content. So branching out, so giving them the beginnings, the nourishing of the story itself, and then seeing where they can go from that. How can they twist the story? How can they change the ending? How can they look at the story from different points of view? What kind of games can we use with them? How can we change the ending? And for this, they need to hear the story probably multiple times so they can focus on different elements of the story as they're going. They might want to modernize the story. In this story with the toothbrush, when there's no real time to it, but if we wanted to modernize it, maybe they would send Mr. Crocodile an email or a text message or a WhatsApp, or they make him a video or something to be able to tell him where it actually is at the end of the story. These kinds of things. And when they talk about harvesting, they're very much talking about the language itself, harvesting the language from the story. So not making the language the focus of the story, but getting them to absorb that language in a more, I guess, inductive way. You know, are we explicitly making a point of the language? And some of it we will need to if we want them to focus on it. And some of it they will just pick it up as they go along. For example, the use of prepositions in that story. The story, our objectives for that particular story may not be prepositions, but we are introducing, we're sowing the seed of prepositions for a later unit when we'll come back to it. And we will be able to recycle that from the story that we did before. We will be able to say, do you remember when we looked at Mr. Crocodile's toothbrush? Can you remember, was it whose head was it on, or who was it next to? You know, we can come back, you know, thinking about the language, not just in isolation, but as part of the entire learning process. This is what they say. I like to add on a little bit more than this. I think it's also important to look at not just the child, because they see the child as the tree itself with the roots. I think it's really important to see a bit beyond that, going into the world outside. How do they interact with that language outside of the classroom? I think is really important as well. So, you know, how do they interact with their parents, their siblings, their classmates, other teachers, other students? I think is really important. We'll look at that in a bit more depth in a bit. Okay, this is another question that was asked in the survey. It was about how much we actually use stories here in the MENA region at the moment. Thankfully, nobody said zero, which is great. But it's interesting to see that I would say the majority of people are using stories in the textbooks, and then they're kind of developing that a little bit more. And then some of them do have a little bit more time to kind of bring in their own stories and do some work around it with that as well, which I think is great. I like to think of it as a kind of story spectrum. I think if we're looking at course books, which I'm sure a lot of people who are attending are using, if you're using kind of a language-based focused approach textbook, I chose English World here, but you could choose a whole variety of various course books. They have a story in them, but they're generally used to introduce grammar, introduce vocabulary, or practice grammar, or contextualize those things perhaps. But they're used usually as a kind of vessel for various types of language. There are some course books which have a kind of stronger story strand. If you look at a title like Story Central, so they give you, it still has the same kind of structure of unit that you would be familiar with, but it gives you a snippet of a story within the unit. So it can give you the beginning or the end of a particular story, and attached to that unit is a reader which has the whole story. So the idea is that it's trying to get students to be hooked with that little clip and to want to read the whole story themselves from the reader. Perhaps they could do that at home, or you could have story sessions in the classroom. So these are kind of taking that kind of traditional methodology and kind of trying to kind of get a bit more story emphasis going on in there. Moving on from that, we have, I would say, the kind of the higher end, which would be something like Global Stage. And this really, I think, is probably the closest I would say I've seen of anything being to a real kind of story-based approach. That's not to say that you cannot use a story-based approach in the other types of methodologies. You absolutely can. Even things like English World and Tiger Time are all mapped to readers. So you could be using the reader in class and then tying that to the language within the book. And that's absolutely possible. But Global Stage, I think, is one of the titles that definitely makes teachers think about the methodology in a completely different way. If you haven't seen Global Stage, I would definitely check it out. The stories within it, there's 10 units, so there's 20 stories. And, they could be sold as, individual stories in their own right. They're beautifully drawn, really emotional language, real variety of cultural stories and folk tales and all sorts of things. Is there anything beyond that? Perhaps, I guess. As I mentioned, I think you can use the story-based approach, in any particular way that you're teaching. If you wanted to just kind of embed that approach, it's not a panacea approach. It's not something that we have to aim for. It's just another tool in your armory. And you may just want to invest, if you were teaching English World and you wanted to use one of the readers, you could just use a 5 or 10 minutes section of your lesson each day to do that story and do something around it and then move back into the language part of your teaching. That's absolutely fine, I think. One of the things that I think it makes us question as teachers is, are we using an accuracy to fluency approach, or are we using a fluency to accuracy approach? If you're teaching with a more traditional textbook or course book, you're probably using an accuracy to fluency methodology more than a fluency one. And a story-based approach can help you to add some variety to that. So you could use a fluency to accuracy approach as well, sometimes, if you think that it is useful in your classroom. And I'm going to end this section because we're running over a little bit. I like this particular slide. I think this is a great quote as well. My name is growing all the time, and I've lived a very long, long time. So my name is like a story. So think of ourselves like story. Okay, so we have 15 to 20 minutes left, and we're going to look very quickly at our activities. Now, you don't have to use these particular activities. They're just ideas. You could make your own. You could take a piece of this. You could take an idea from this. That's absolutely fine. We're going to be getting progressively, I put progressively more advanced, but I would say maybe the activities are maybe progressively more complex. We're starting with more well-known, I'd say simpler activities at the beginning. So bear with us, because the first one will probably be like, oh, what? But stay with us. The first one is, of course, circle time. Now, for many of you, you will be using circle time already. I've put this in here as an introductory activity because we do work in a very wide-ranging and very diverse region. MENA incorporates a lot of places and a lot of teaching contexts. So there may be teachers out there who don't use a circle time approach. It's very popular in kindergarten or perhaps year 1 or year 2. But I think if we think about the benefits of a methodology, a circle time methodology, we can also think of it in terms of older students as well. Yes, we probably wouldn't get them like this, to sit around in a circle on the carpet if they're in grades 5 or grade 6, but we can adapt this type of methodology for them. So we could have them in groups of their own. They could have their own circle time. So we could have 4 groups, each of a circle, each with a person in charge, and they could focus on a particular story together. One could tell it, the others could listen, they could maybe come up with questions, this kind of thing. For older students, I think that's still absolutely fine. We're not going to stop on circle time too much. It's just a nice one. If you don't use it, it's a really good way of getting children settled. You could use it at the end of class to do a quick story before they leave, etc. The second one, also a very well-known activity. This was the activity that was suggested at the end of the reading, was to move into drama and role play, getting children involved as much as possible with the story, rather than them just kind of, reading it out in class, getting them to act out certain parts. They love that. They want to be involved. They want to get engaged. So yeah, giving them as much opportunities for this as possible, I think, is quite important. So think about ways that you can take a story and get them to act it out. It may be getting them to act it out at the beginning. So if we're looking at the crocodile story, I could have shown certain students, I could have called them up to the front, and shown them very quietly a picture of the crocodile and said, okay, you have to act this out, and the other students are going to guess who it's going to be. So it wouldn't be me as the teacher doing it. Always try and think of a way of getting the children to do something instead of you doing it. And then the more you practice that approach, the more students are doing stuff, and they're more involved. There is a recording of this session. It's being recorded as we speak. So they're the first two, which are very quick. I'm just kind of mentioning them in passing more, just to get us thinking about different types of activities. The third one is creating a book club. Now, this is probably better for slightly older students, but this kind of, I guess, is an extension of what this circle time activity would be. Now, I'll put on as when I released this activity into the classroom as an actual PDF or something of the actual activity, you'll see, kind of the way you can bring out or develop a book club type activity in the classroom. But it's about giving them roles. They've got different roles within this group. One of them is the narrator. One of them is focused on characters. One of them could be focused on plot. One of them could be focused on a different type of ending. So there's lots of different roles, and they need different roles so that they can ask questions that are specific to their role, which is really important, I think, in developing the book club. Of course, this won't appeal to every student. Not every student wants to be in a book club. But I think it's definitely, if you can start that process, and if we're thinking about developing a book club, I think we can't just turn up one day and say, oh, we're going to start a book club today. Children kind of need to be eased into that a little bit. So we might need to do some preparatory activities, which give them the types of roles that they would have in the book club so that they can practice them ahead of time. And then we can maybe put them into small groups, small social groups, and they could then choose a story and develop it together as a group. You've put there how to develop a book club. This will be actually in the classroom. So I will put a document about how to set up a book club in that classroom, so you will have it. We can attach it as well to the webinar for people who have attended as well, which isn't a problem. Okay, next activity. Now we're moving into areas which I tend to really enjoy. This one is to sell a story. So when we do a story with older students, quite often we'll do lots of activities around the story. And a lot of those activities are either individual, or if they're group-based, they tend to be within the groups within their own class. So they may do a group-based project, for example. But the introduction of, I think, this particular type of activity is to create something that they can then use with students in another year. So you would need to pair up with another teacher to do this particular activity. So if I'm the year 5 teacher, we've done the BFG, so I'll just use that as an example. We could do that again, this is a project in class. We could do a storyboarding activity. And it's really useful, I think, for students, certainly older students, to see a story. And it's a particular skill to be able to simplify that story for somebody else, to be able to summarize it. And these are the types of skills they're going to need in secondary, and certainly when they go on to do more academic work. How do we sequence? How do we structure? How do we break something down and summarize it? If you're thinking about them when they become, 18 years old and they're doing the IELTS, these are the kinds of skills that they're really going to need. So we need to simplify that process. We could give them in pairs a storyboard summary. They can create pictures. So they turn what's quite a complex story, quite a complex book, into something very easily manageable. So, 3 pictures for the beginning, 3 pictures for the middle, 3 pictures for the end. You could give 1 pair the beginning, 1 pair the middle, 1 pair the end, and then they come together as a group of 6 to have an entire storyboard. And then they can review it together and they can say, okay, is this in simple enough language to be able to present this to a year 2 classroom? So then I would negotiate with the year 2 teacher, and maybe at the end of the week, we set up a 10 or 15 minute time slot where we take a few of the students into year 2 and they can read the story to year 2 students. Again, you're bringing in another narrator, another connection, and you're making the year 5 students role models for the year 2 students, but you're also showing the year 5 students that you value them, that they're respected. There's a lot of power in giving them, this ownership over something that they've created. And they can do many things. They could make it creative. I put the BFG cover there. They could make their own advert as if it was being sold as a movie, and see how many of the younger children want to sign up to see it, this kind of thing. So there's loads of scope to get quite creative, I think, with this type of activity. But for me, the real power of this type of activity is bringing different children of different ages and in different classes together to learn from each other, to connect with each other, to see what they're going to be doing when they're older. I think this is really powerful. So that's the 4th activity. And again, I will post something about this in the module so that you can see. It may not work for everybody. The 5th and final one is, I guess, if we're thinking about a story-based approach, our ultimate aim is to get students to create their own stories. There's nothing more powerful when it comes to using language than having your own ideas, being creative, making your own stories. I know that I haven't had much time to discuss some of these things in an online context, because that's what we're facing nowadays. A lot of this stuff has been in class, which hopefully we will go back to. But for this one, you can actually use Google Forms to create a story, and they can personalize it. I've done it there. This took me like 5 minutes to do. And the nice thing about using it in Google Forms is, you can bring in your own emojis. They can create the story however they wish. And where it says next, you can have questions, and you can actually manipulate the sections so that you can actually miss a section. So depending on the answer that you choose for a particular activity. So if they chose win, they would skip and they would go to something else. If they chose lose, the story can take a different direction, and they can think of different ways. And I think if you give your students a bit of creative license, they can actually come up with some really interesting things. It's kind of like, I guess, an extension of what they already do with things like TikTok. I guess they make these little videos and stories. They're very into that. So utilize some of those types of things that they already enjoy doing. And you can use some of these things, in a kind of an assessment format as well. You could ask them to create the story based on something that you've already done in class. So they're the ideas. You will see more about those things in the module itself when I post them, which will probably be over the weekend. For our conclusion, we'll just wrap it up. We've got a couple of minutes left. Stories are great as a motivational tool. Don't see a story as just one story to be delivered. It has many pathways available to you. Exploit those opportunities as much as possible. Think about the development process of the actual story, nourishing those roots, giving them creative ways to express what they do with that story, and see what kind of language they can harvest from that, rather than you having to spoon feed the language word by word or grammar by grammar. And then think about how that's connected to the wider scene We've mentioned activities where they get involved with other classes in school. It could be with their parents. It could be with siblings. It could be with anybody outside of the classroom. What opportunities do your students have to engage with that language outside of the classroom? We want them to develop reading for pleasure as a skill. We want them to be lifelong readers, because those children tend to do much better at school and later in life. And for me, it's all about relationships and collaboration. How can we get them to do the work themselves and interact with each other in as many ways as possible? That's all from me. I finished a minute early. Wow, this is a first for me. I think I probably skipped a lot of the content, that was why. I hope you enjoyed. I hope there was something in there that was at least of interest to you. And I will aim to get that stuff over the weekend onto the classroom. And you will have the whole month of September. The closing date for the practical and collaborative activities will be the 30th of September. So you have plenty of time to see how school goes back. And some of you are going to need to engage with that content in different ways. And it'll be really interesting, I think, to see how some of you actually go about doing that, whether you make your own activities, how you adapt them for the online learning environment. If you're a teacher in Saudi Arabia, you're not going to have a choice because they're only doing online. If you're in somewhere like the UAE, you might be going back to class. But how are you going to be doing things like circle time if there's social distancing? So it's going to be really interesting, I think, over the next month or 2 months to see how people develop some of those activities. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was useful. I hope that you are all doing well with your back to school preparations, and I wish you all the best. I would like to invite Ala back into the room if she is still around. I don't know if we lost her. In the meantime, she's going to see if anyone has any questions. So if you have any questions, please do type them in the box. In the meantime, please do join our community. We've got MENA PD Academy by Macmillan Education. It's on Facebook or on LinkedIn, Facebook being the more popular. Definitely sign up so you can see all of our activities, both the global ones and the ones that are MENA based as well. Ala, do we have you?
I am here. Thank you, Nathan, for a very useful and enjoyable session. So I was wondering if anyone has a question here, please type it in the chat box.
I did see one question throughout the webinar, which was something about suggesting websites for for story activities, and I'll post something in the classroom about that as well. I'll make a note of it, and I will perhaps make a list and post them as a post. And again, then if anybody else wants to add to that post, they can with their own suggestions. I'm sure people have far more suggestions than I do, but I've got a couple, I'm sure.
There was also a question that popped up during the session, Nathan, about ways teachers can help their students to predict in a better way, like suggestions for prediction tasks.
Okay. Sorry, go on, repeat the question.
Yeah, okay. So how can teachers help their students predict better?
Okay, I would say keep it as simple as possible. If you want them to predict, they need to have the language already to be able to do so. So when we did the crocodile story, I would have done that story after they'd already done the unit on rooms of the house. So they've already got that particular language, and we're trying to recycle it. Yeah. So think about what they already can do and what they already know to get them to predict. But they should be able to predict in many ways. I would say it's about that hook, I guess. It's about them wanting to predict more than the ability to predict. I think it's about how we set that scene, perhaps. And it can be very simple. It could just be like, what if, or what might happen next, or these kinds of things. Start with very simple activities, and the more you do them, the more they'll develop that skill, I think.
Thank you. Um, there's another question that says, does storytelling work with all ages?
Yes, I would say it definitely works with all ages. And sometimes I think that because we become very academic focused and stories kind of slip away, we don't have time for them. We're focused on assessments and these kinds of things. But I think older students still really enjoy stories. I mean, I've taught in um, grade 6 in the UK, and they still have a very story-based methodology running through the activities that they do. I mean, that's first language, I know, but they're the same age. So I would say definitely yes, they do. And the more we can keep that going, but I think schools need to work together as a team to do that. I think it's very difficult if you're the year 6 teacher and they do stories in year 1, and then the year 2, 3, 4, and 5 teacher don't do any stories, and then you try to reintroduce it to them. I think that's going to cause problems. So I think when it comes to these kinds of methodologies, I think it needs to be a coordinated effort.
Mhm. Thank you. Um, shall we take one more question?
For people who are interested in the recording, I will post the recording onto both of these groups that are mentioned here on this page. There isn't actually a certificate for the webinar. The certificate is for the module as a whole, because this webinar is actually part of that, but we opened it up to everybody. So if you're not registered on that module, get in touch with us and we will get you in. The registration is still open for a couple more days. I will probably close it on Thursday night. We have 10 times more number of students in the actual class than we intended, but it's great. I think that's fantastic. The more people, the better. So please do register. In fact, I think I can. No, I think it's a bit too late. I could have posted the link, but do you want the link? Okay, I can give you the link. Give me a second. Ala, did you want to ask that last question?
Yeah, sure. So there is a question about the possibility of activating a storyline approach online. Is it possible, or how easy is it to work with this approach in online classes?
I would say definitely it can be more difficult in some ways, or it can be easier in others. I mean, you don't have to manage the group so much when you're doing it online, because obviously they're just sitting in their own house. So, I mean, most teachers have probably come to terms with the fact that the student's camera may be off and the student may be visible in their box, but they may not actually be listening to you at all. So, that's just the reality, I guess. But when you've got 25, 30, 40 students in a classroom, managing them as a group to do a story, I know teachers can find that a little intimidating sometimes. So you don't have that aspect when you do it online. But yeah, I think if you're going to do it online, you need to simplify the process. You could just read it to them and set them a particular task to do. So, it could be like that one of predicting. We could just read the story to them. If they listen, they listen. If they don't, well, there's nothing you can do about that. And then you could set them a task, and they have to do that task and then feed it back to you. So you could just have it as a setting up of an activity type of activity, I think. But yeah, you could do it, I would say.
Right.
Okay, I've got the link here, and I will post it. There you go. And I pinned it as well. So if you want to register, you can register at this link if you haven't already. But if you go to these pages, you will see the registration pages as well, because they're both posted on the Facebook and the LinkedIn group. Thanks very much, Ala. That was very helpful of you.
Thank you, Nathan.
Do the question and answer section. I think we've probably utilized most of the time that we can. Let them get back to their busy lives and hard work.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, the Facebook group is a private group. But if you just type in MENA PD Academy by Macmillan Education, you should see a private group, and you'll have to request to join. But if you do, I will see it and I will let you in. If you struggle, then maybe contact the educational consultant for your territory, or if you want, people can get in touch with me as well. Probably should have put my email address. Anybody wants, and if anybody's struggling to access the module, get in touch with me, and I can also let you in with your email address as well. Another webinar on the 2nd of September, I may do. I've got lots of webinars going on. I can't remember. I think I do, yes, in Saudi Arabia, maybe. Thank you very much, everybody. People are starting to drift away now, so we will say goodbye. Thanks very much, and we will see you for our next webinar. There are lots of global webinars going on at the moment. If you're still here, go to macmillanenglish.com and you will see there's one this evening, and there's one pretty much every day for the next 2 weeks. Take care, everybody, and we will see you soon. Oh, say goodbye from this guy too. Bye.